Hello and welcome to the Jason Q Citizen Show. My name is Jason Olborn and I am the founder of World Series News and A Million Mums for Informed Consent. Well, guess what? I'm back doing truly independent news, no longer working at the radio station where I was lucky enough to be given tenure for a period of 12 months before it was agreed, and I decided that I didn't want to just focus on the narrow stories of the day because I believe there is a much bigger picture at play, and I want to be able to report on all of it, even if it means talking about extraterrestrials, because guess what? There is something big at play behind the scenes. And if you want to be taken seriously in this town or in any town around the world, you can't talk about ETs. You just simply can't. It's considered to be a bridge too far. Well, in a subsequent show, I'm planning and I'm looking forward to interviewing the author of an incredible book. And if I can't get that person on the show, I'll do the story myself. It won't matter because all the information is already in there, and we'll extrapolate on exactly what may well be holding this entire big story in place. Well, the reason for the news program today, and they will be sporadic until it is a time that it is just too much to stop, I'll give you the biggest stories that apply to where it is that we're going and what's actually happening. So, Joe Biden, as we all know, is in incredibly tough times at the moment, with hot water encapsulating him no matter where he goes, whether it be his son and the laptop, or whether it be his business dealings with China or Ukraine, or even the classified document scandal. Biden's days in the White House, in the Oval Office, are numbered. Whether he limps forward to 2024 and is defeated or replaced in a primary, or whether Kamala Harris is going to replace him somehow, that is a bridge too far. I've been saying all along that Kamala will have to be replaced before Biden. And if you know anything about politics, nothing happens that isn't already planned. So in this show, we're going to talk about that with some breaking news today on Kamala Harris. And I'm also going to address breaking news that's coming out of Australia, because at long last, the mainstream news is finally getting cranky after the 9th interest rate rise in a row. And whilst I might hold back my I told you so, I'm also going to talk about what it was that we offered when I ran as a candidate last year, all the way up to May 22, of different ways. And instead of being rewarded with debate and argument and media coverage on that issue that was going to protect you at home, all the Australians who are now in mortgage stress, my tyres were punctured 7 times. So be it. Sometimes that's just what happens when you try to bring out the truth. And the truth is not what people want to hear, because it's not coming from the source that they believe in. I am just a person like you at home, just a normal person. But what I couldn't cop was the fact that the authorities were deliberately doing us a disservice, and that is why I stood up for it. And as you know, when it comes to health, well, many of us that went against the system are still here, thriving, and in fact doing better than those that followed along. But we've told you to suck eggs long enough. Let's get on with the reality of what's really going on. So the first story of the day, it's a big one. Something we've been talking about for a while. Biden has been urged to dump Kamala as the vice president after explosive allegations hit the White House. What is going on? As of January 23, 40% of US adults surveyed said that they had a very unfavorable opinion of the Democratic VP Harris, according to statistic.com, with 14% only answering that they had a highly favorable opinion of her. The LA Times is tracking their former attorney general. Whilst her hometown paper describes her as a California native, Harris is the first female, black, and South Asian American to serve as the nation's second in command. According to their polling, as of January 10, 53% had an unfavorable opinion. A New York Times profile piece published over the weekend did not portray Vice President Kamala Harris's political future in a positive way, furthering speculation that President Joe Biden may dump her ahead of the 2024 election. John Dowdy reporting for the Conservative Brief with more details on that story. Several Democrats who spoke to the outlet anonymously doubted she would be the 2024 nominee and added that she has done not much to define herself and her role in the administration. Even some Democrats, whom her advisors referred reporters to for supportive quotes, confided privately that they had lost hope in her, says the report from Zolan Cano-Youngs, Katie Rogers, and Peter Baker. The report noted that a panic has emerged within the Democratic ranks as many begin to question whether an 80-year-old President Biden will ever run again, leaving Harris as the next obvious but unappealing choice. Through much of the fall, a quiet panic set in amongst key Democrats about what would happen if President Biden opted not to run for a second term. Most Democrats interviewed who insisted on anonymity to avoid alienating the White House said flatly they did not think Ms. Harris could win the presidency in 2024, the Times report noted. Some say the party's biggest challenge would be finding a way to sideline her without inflaming key Democrat constituencies that would take offense. The Times offered their defense of Harris. Since taking office, Harris has been assigned one of the administration's thorniest issues, stemming the influx of immigrants attempting to cross US borders. After taking on that role, Harris's approval ratings began to decline, with unfavourable opinions surpassing favourable ones in January of 21. Whether the decline is directly related to the immigration debate is uncertain, as the dip in her approval also corresponds to a small decline in President Biden's job approval. Small decline. The dip followed an interview with NBC's Lester Holt, where Harris bristled at a question about why she had not visited the border, triggering criticism. Comments about immigration at the United States southern border during visits to Mexico and Guatemala have also sparked controversy. The White House naturally offered praise for Harris, but the Times noted that she has been polling worse than Biden for most of his term, and his numbers aren't stellar. They're in the 30% range. She was also put in charge of issues like mitigating the still ongoing crisis along the US-Mexico border, but have done little to fix it. In a scathing piece published by The Hill, Douglas McKinnon suggested that Democrats could be in a world of hurt if they don't look beyond the current occupants of the White House. About 2 months ago, he wrote an article suggesting that Biden should replace his VP Kamala Harris with California Governor Gavin Newsom and then resign to give Democrats a better chance of retaining the White House in 24. Though, of course, it was not a game plan that Biden would ever entertain. His intent was to ignite a discussion on the viability of a ticket led by either Biden or Harris going forward. And his point still stands. When it comes to picking a presidential ticket for 24, many people believe, including some liberals, the Democrat Party would be in a world of hurt if it doesn't look beyond the current occupants of the White House. Some Democrats have told me they don't think either Biden or Harris would give their party the best chance in the next election. More than that, several worry that Democrats will have a dilemma if they try to move away from Harris, since she's the first woman and first person of color to be elected VP, a special place in American history. In a similar piece published by The Slate, if Biden runs again, he should pick a new VP. Christina Corterucci noted that we are stuck with Joe Biden and Harris for now, but that Biden will be able to change that going into 24. And a memo to Democrats: beware of Kamala Harris in 24 or beyond, where Democrat strategist Gary South detailed, despite her obvious intelligence, Harris just isn't very good, I'm sorry to say, either as a candidate or a communicator. When it comes to Harris in 24 or beyond, Democrats would be wise to bear in mind the old-time honor caution, caveat emptor, buyer beware. Well, that is about as scathing a report as you can get from left-leaning newspapers such as the New York Times and The Hill, and you've got Slate in there as well, giving Harris a roasting. So what we're seeing are the political machinations of how it is that you have to remove Harris first to then install someone who won't be elected, who will then replace Biden, who will give them the best chance going forward. And the only name being spoken of at the moment is Gavin Newsom. Of course, there's been much speculation whether Hillary be resurrected yet again to save the day. And of course, Michelle Obama, another person of color. So which way will we go and see? But it's very clear that the darling in all of this is one Gavin Newsom, who just happens to be a global leader, young global leader from the World Economic Forum. Gavin Newsom, who was elected or placed into that position as early as 2006. And here is his background. 1989, he got a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Santa Clara University. Well, I also have a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of New South Wales circa 1993, but I didn't go on to become the founder of Plumpjack Wine Shop 2 years after getting his degree. That's interesting. And 8 years later, elected to serve on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and 2003 elected as the mayor of San Francisco, granting marriage licenses to same-sex couples, initiated a plan to bring universal healthcare to all the city's uninsured residents, and pursued long solutions to global climate change, and in 2007 re-elected to the current position, and then, of course, went on to become the governor of California, and now being touted as the man from California who will be installed as vice president. And guess what? The next president of the United States. But will he be the next Californian to be installed into the White House? Or could it be something entirely unexpected where the current VP and the current president get wiped out one way or another, and the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, becomes the interim president? Watch this space. If anyone's going to work that out, it'll be here on the Jason Q Citizen Show. Now, let's have a look at something else that's quite disturbing. The World Economic Forum and their Young Global Leaders program. And who is on the list? Well, it's an extensive list, but I'll give you some of the highlights. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google. Niall Ferguson, Bilderberger historian. Larry Page, co-founder of Google. Gavin Newsom, governor of California. Nathaniel Rothschild, young global leader. Joe Hockey, Australian politician and diplomat, in 2006 was made a young global leader. Then you've got other names that we'll go through here. Peter Thiel, billionaire member of the Bilderberg Steering Committee. Rajiv Shah was employed at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for 7 years before he started working for the government, you said, before then moving on to the Rockefeller Foundation. Well, Rajiv, you certainly were going to be a global leader, weren't you, mate? Now, who else have we got on the list that we can read? Oh, Mark Zuckerberg, the US billionaire credited with starting Facebook. He was credited. What an interesting way to say that Mark Zuckerberg was credited with starting Facebook. Of course, we all saw the movie, the Facebook movie written by the fellow that made The West Wing. What was it called? The Social Media or something like that, where we learned that he stole the idea. And then, of course, we learned that it was also a CIA program. Stefan Bancel, 2009, was also made a young global leader. He was the CEO of Moderna. Would you believe that was 11 full years before his company brought a single medical product to the market, which was its jibby jab. But they knew about him in 2009, and he was nothing more than a pharmaceutical salesman at that point. Truly incredible. Julian Castro, US politician, was brought in 2010, young global leader. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, another doctor who works on CNN, young global leader. Nikki Haley later became the United States ambassador to the United Nations, also a young global leader. Huma Abedin in 2012. There you go. We all know about Huma. She was the right-hand woman of Hillary Clinton. And if we keep scrolling down this extensive list, I'm sure we're going to find more politicians. Pierre Mordaye, Swiss politician who attended the 2015 Bilderberg. Jacinda Ardern, installed in 2014. She was a young global leader. She's now resigned as the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Emmanuel Macron, the French President, is a French Rothschild banker turned politician. What do you know that we're going to put Macron in there as well? And Leela Tretikov, Vice President, Microsoft from 2018 and specialist in artificial intelligence, also a young global leader. And Leanna Wen, American physician and former president of Planned Parenthood, has distinguished herself during the COVID-19 deep event by wanting to make the life of the unvaccinated a living hell. That is straight from this article. Incredible. And Alexander Soros, son of George Soros and deputy chair of the Open Society Foundations. Pete Buttigieg, 2019, young global leader. And let's see who we've got in the last years in the COVID period. Anyone exciting that we don't know about? There's a number of names there, but many that you don't know. Perhaps we can pay in the last one that's been put up here. Vasudha Vats, also on the list, is a VP of Pfizer. Young global leaders. Well, here we go. So now, another big story, and this one is an Australian story, but it's happening all around the world as inflation is just getting out of control everywhere. And it's not just the inflation that's measured, it's the inflation that's not measured. At the same time, it's the cost of living, and that's also the deflation in asset prices. So it's one thing to be paying low interest in a booming market, but it's a completely different thing whilst prices are inflating, food costs are going up, but the price and the value of your home is falling as interest rates rise, and also the value of your motor vehicle, which for many people is either their primary asset or a secondary asset. So it might be one thing that you own a car that might have been worth $20,000 or $30,000 last year, but as interest rates rise, all of a sudden there aren't as many buyers for that car, and your $20,000 car is struggling these days to get $12,000, $13,000 or $14,000. So if you need to sell it to get some money back, and perhaps you've got a personal loan attached, there ain't going to be much equity left over at the end of it. Needless to say, people who are paying interest on all sorts of purchases, credit card interest, mortgage interest, home loans, cars, etc., business loans and overdrafts are all struggling with interest rate rises if they are affected by a variable rate increase. The other big thing that's going on is that during the COVID period, fixed interest rates fell through the floor, and people fixed for 2%, 2.3%, 2.9% for periods of 1, 2, 3 or 5 years here in Australia. And many of those 3-year fixed rates are coming off, and as many as 800,000 home loans, according to the ANZ, are now coming off, and they're seeing their 2.5%, 3% interest rates being now replaced by 6.5% interest rates, which means that their price of interest going up is over 250% increase on the payments they're making before. And if you haven't got equity in your property and you can sell, or if you're in a situation where you've got to try and fund an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month, depending on the size of your mortgage, it becomes very, very frightening if you don't have the cash flow. Well, Senator Ralph Babet from the United Australia Party, he put out a press release yesterday, more pain for Australian homeowners. In the wake of the RBA's cash rate announcement, Senator Babet speaks up for financially challenged Victorians. Senator Babet said, "Another day, another dollar falls out of the pockets of the Australian people. Today, the RBA has increased interest rates for the 9th consecutive time. Inflation is still out of control, and the RBA continues to pull the blunt interest rate lever, which hurts households more than anyone. The average Victorian mortgage is $618,109. Since May 2022, homeowners have seen their minimum monthly mortgage repayment increase by a staggering $1,102 per month, with no relief in sight. Our Treasurer's number one weapon against inflation appears to be a 6,000-word essay promoting the benefits of big government intervention, a strategy which has been proven to fail every time and everywhere it has been tried. This Labor government promised cost of living relief and so far has delivered nothing but pain. The government must take the lead, balance the budget, and attempt the difficult task of reducing public debt, even if it means reducing the size of the bureaucracy," said Senator Babet. Look, it's a bold statement from Senator Ralph Babet, and I'm happy that he's put it out there. What's interesting, of course, is that he's talking about the Treasurer, Dr. Jim Chalmers, who got his doctorate, his PhD, for writing a paper on Paul Keating. What's interesting about that is that the Albanese government, when he was in the election campaign, said that he would run his government like the Hawke Keating government. Hawke Keating government came out as great economic reformers. They deregulated the financial sector, floated the Australian dollar, and handed out a whole raft of microeconomic reform and wage accords that created a whole new economy where pay rises based on CPI were replaced by pay rises based on productivity increases. Now, the first thing that Chalmers did when he got into office was give low-income earners a CPI increase, immediately making a liar out of Albanese. Albanese, of course, has gone missing as usual, as we saw in Alice Springs, nowhere to be seen on this issue because Albanese, a virtual communist in disguise, he's not even in disguise anymore, is out there telling us that he's going to be a great economic manager, he's going to be seen, and of course he's nowhere to be seen. And a reminder, Albo, at the budget reply when you tweeted, "If I'm Prime Minister, I won't go missing when the going gets tough or pose for photos and then disappear when there's a job to be done. I'll show up, I'll step up, and I'll work every day to bring our country together." Nonsense. Albanese, nowhere as usual. Now, Peter Dutton coming out and finally saying something on behalf of the Liberals says that mortgages are always more expensive under Labor. And that gave Channel 9 today the opportunity to come out and push the same argument. Well, ScoMo changed everything when he was the Prime Minister under the COVID era, when he was literally using quantitative easing or the printing of money to flood the Australian market with billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that got the debt up to $1 trillion in this country, unseen ever before. We'd never really seen government debt anywhere near $100 billion in the past. And the former Liberal government, 2 governments ago, the Howard Costello era, actually had the country with a government surplus. Can you believe that? Now we have $1 trillion in debt, and neither ScoMo, when he was running for Prime Minister to be re-elected, or Albanese, who was the opposition, had any plan to even talk about it. What's interesting in all of this is that Senator Ralph Babet is a member of the United Australia Party, a party which I'm also currently a member of. Now, I ran as a candidate for the seat of Paterson in the area of the Hunter Valley of New South Wales, big coal mining town. So we had a number of different issues, interest rates being one of them. Well, we couldn't get any coverage on our policy. So what I want to do is I'm going to put the core flutes that I used in the campaign up on the screen and just ask a very simple question of our viewers. How would you like to wind back the clock 9 or 10 months and maybe have a discussion? Not saying you had to vote for me, review, God forbid I'd ever ask you to go out of your way to do anything like that, but simply to look at the policies and go, wonder if we could review that again. Let's take the first one. This was a policy put forward by Clive Palmer's party. Yep, said the dirty word of Clive Palmer. Save your home, 3% capped interest for 5 years. Yes, at the UAP, they had got some actual economists to get involved with policy setting, came up with a plan that whilst we saw the writing on the wall for the massive inflation coming, that we would cap home loan interest rates and force the banks to keep their mortgages at 3% for 5 years to allow Australians to keep their home, even if inflation got a little bit dirty in the short term, but there'd be other things that we could do in order to protect against inflation. One of those would be to work out how to pay down the debt to pull money out of the economy in a different way or add money into the economy. There's a couple of ways that you can do it. The latter had never been done before. So what did the mining magnate and his economists work out would be a really good policy that would also lead by example? Take a look at this reminder. How about pay off $1 trillion debt with a 15% iron ore export license? That means that with all of the iron ore already booked in to be sold to China for its construction efforts, that we could collect around $20 billion in year one, which would go up with inflation as time went, and $20 billion could be used to retire some of that $1 trillion in government debt. So if you look at that and then you add in inflation, you'd be looking at somewhere between 25 and 30 years to pay down the debt using an iron ore export license, which wouldn't have hurt the bottom line for Australians. At the same time, you would have been able to protect home loans at 3% for 5 years. Now, to further go on with it, return $1 trillion in overseas super to Australia for local investment. That also would have been handy instead of being in a situation now that our money is in overseas funds, also going through a hell of a economic downturn in countries all facing recessions at the same time. Well, so much more we can talk about. There are many other policies that we ran with, but that's not necessary for today. So there is a lot of information about in what's going on, and one feels very, very sore and sorry for those people that are suffering with their home loans today. What can you do about it? Well, there's a couple of strategies that you might want to consider. The first one is that whilst you've been paying principal and interest on your home loan during a low period of time, and many would have been trying to pay down their debt, you can talk to your bank about flexibility options. It's not a case of going and asking for them to stop your interest, because that goes into a default situation. But what you can ask them to do is other strategies. And one such strategy that they may offer to you is to go interest only. That means whilst you don't pay down your principal in the short term, you just simply service the interest, which keeps the wolves at bay in the very short term. Interest rates will go up, as they've predicted, another 5 or 6 times this year. That's what the RBA is talking about. That's what the mainstream media is talking about. And of course, I'm not giving you financial advice for that one person out there who wants to be narky. What I'm saying is these are strategies. So if you pay down just interest only over a period of time, the interest rates will eventually fall down again and stabilize as the economy gets over the inflation and needs stimulus, and then you can start paying again. It's just one way to keeping your home, because many people would realize that you'd be better off not paying down the debt on your mortgage, but not losing your home trying to. And that would mean agents' fees, stamp duty on the next home if you're lucky enough to get in one, or to stave off bankruptcy altogether, which is the fear that everyone really has. Now, another option is, as my friend Craig Schultz from the One Shot Movement would say when I interviewed him on my show, was try and find a side hustle, somewhere where you can pick up $200 or $300 extra a week. Maybe it's mowing the lawns, maybe it's doing some Uber driving, maybe it's doing a number of different things. Maybe it's just selling a few of the excess items you don't need on Marketplace or something like that, that you can generate a bit of money and use that to top up the interest that you've got to pay. This is something you've got to look for the next 2 years or so in the tough times that are ahead for us. And of course, the other option is, if you're lucky enough to have room in your home, perhaps you could rent out a room to somebody that you trust or know and give them a subsidized rate of $150 or $200 a week. And it may be another way, indeed, that you can just bridge the gap in what you're doing. These are just practical ideas, ways that we might not necessarily think about, but there are ways that we can work together as a community to make sure that we don't lose the prized possession that we've worked our entire lives for. So when they say you'll own nothing and be happy, World Economic Forum, you can tell Klaus Schwab to shove that one where it fits. Unacceptable. You didn't work your whole life to have someone take it off you because times got tough and the government puts its hands up in the air and goes, sorry, can't help you anymore. Bad luck. That's what economies do after they just pumped $1 trillion in, telling us that the government's going to save you from a great big crisis, which, by the way, we still don't even know whether it was man-made, made in a lab, leaked from a lab, and yet they want to sign us up to a pandemic treaty. So much of this is nonsense, and it's why on this program I've gone independent again, because I want to talk about the big stories of the day, right up to the very, very top, where it's going to be determined who is actually in control and who answers to who. I still am going to do a report on John Kerry and his quote about Davos and the extraterrestrials. And in the same meeting from Davos, where Al Gore came out talking about climate change and 1 billion climate refugees means we would lose the right to self-governance. Well, if we lose the right to self-governance, who would be governing us, Al Gore? Who are you talking about? Artificial intelligence or extraterrestrials? Why did John Kerry travel to Antarctica 3 days after President Trump was elected as the sitting Secretary of State? Both Gore and John Kerry would have had high security clearances. How high is a question for another day. This is a news report from the Jason Q Citizen Show, from Jason Olbourne, the founder of World Series News, and I'm delighted to be back in the chair bringing you the real news and the big picture of the day, because when we get past this debacle that we're going through as the powers that be want to change the world to serve themselves, we need to know what comes next and what world we want. Smile, enjoy the day, enjoy the moment, because we are here. And in all the spiritual awakening that's going through, realize that you were born for this moment, so you might as well enjoy the tough times and make them good times, being present in the moment. What a time to be alive. I'll see you on the next show.
Game over, man.